got a saying called doing a Mandela, which is any long sentence after Nelson Mandela. And I've read about Nelson Mandela on Robben Island and the lime pits and everything else, but he didn't do his 27 years as hard as Kathleen Folbigg's done her 19. He was among compadres, people who liked him and respected him, and they worked for the same things and had some of the same ideas and had the same aims. She's been as lonely as an onion pedder on a windswept elbow to Calais. The other thing is, this was all started by a medical fad, a mania, a fashion, and because of the obstinacy of one of our state criminal justice systems, New South Wales, but with honourable exceptions in Tasmania and South Australia, we're no better. We've got one appeal system, and we'll go through a legal history, but this terrible miscarriage of justice, easily, in my opinion, the worst since hanging stopped at 67, has got to come to an end, and it's due to come to an end in sometime in 2023. I would point out to you that this woman's been rotting in prison for nearly 20 years, and no one can get a hurry on to get her out. So that's sort of been one of my motivations. So I'll get straight back into the story. Kathleen Marlborough went to a Newcastle disco, local disco, and there she met a bloke called Craig Folbigg, one of those older men, 26, in 1985. They fell in love, they got married, they bought a house, and they started having children. Her firstborn was Caleb, and in '89. Caleb only lived for under 20 days and died. No one knew why. No one found any organ problems, no infections, no poisons, no nothing like that. No wounds, no. Yep. So, in line with the prevailing orthodoxy, he was diagnosed with cot death, crib death, or sudden infant death syndrome, called SIDS. In other words, SIDS is a syndrome of exhaustion, a diagnosis of exhaustion. We don't know is what it means. That's what it means. So they had another child, Patrick. When Patrick was about 4 months old, he had what's called in the trade, the pathology trade, an ALT, an ALTE, an acute life-threatening event. He couldn't breathe properly. He was rushed to hospital. He spent a lot of time in hospital. They diagnosed him with epilepsy. He was going blind. His hearing was probably going to be impaired. His cognition was never going to be great. But Craig and Kathleen plugged on, and then suddenly, for no apparent reason, he died in his sleep. This time, what went on the death certificate was asphyxia. A reason, the word asphyxia means a low oxygen state. That's all it means, nothing more, nothing less. And it's not much worth use putting it on a birth certificate, because everyone here is going to die of asphyxia. The heart stops, then your lung stops, or your lung stops, your heart stops. Who cares? I mean, it's not a very useful word. But the epilepsy we'll come back to. Sarah Folbigg lasted 10 months. Now, that means she got through the 2 to 6 months high-risk period in the bell curve of SIDS deaths, which was, you know, and they had everything. They had the monitors, and they had the advice, and they had all these things. And she died in her sleep at the age of 8 months. Sorry, my apologies. Then Laura died. She lasted 18 months. Now, by this stage, a later stage, SIDS gets regularised, and you've got to live for 20 days and less than 270 days to get into it. That became sort of the official SIDS range. She'd well and truly passed that. She had a big first birthday and one thing and another. And this is where the medical mania came in. The pathologist a man called Dr. Alan Carler, performed the autopsy. He found that there was some light, diffuse infection in her heart muscle, myocarditis, a bacterium. However, he said that she did not die of it, she died with it, she died of something else. And he clearly thought murder. Now, at the Glebe morgue, where he did this, he was overlooked by his boss, Professor Hilton, who'd done the autopsy on Sarah and knew there was a history of death, sudden deaths of kids in the family. At a later stage, Dr. Alan Carler will become a prosecution witness, and his boss will become a defence witness. And most of it hinges on Laura. Right. There have been 3 books written on the Folbigg case, R versus Folbigg. The first one was written, called When the Bow Breaks by Matthew Benz, and if you read it, you'll get a lazy person who's made good friends with the policeman who was involved, and made good friends with the ex, Craig, who was a prosecution witness, and followed the prosecution line and was guilty as hell. Never even questioned the verdict. And frankly, you wouldn't expect much from a guy who cut his teeth in the UK tabloids, frankly. But however, I came across it, just a personal note. I was asked by Penguin to do a book in 2007 on murder in the family. And naturally enough, I chose Folbigg because 4 children was the biggest filicide I had. One of the things I did discover is that fathers and mothers don't kill their kids very often. It's rare. Very, very rare. And so I started to write the chapter, and the more I got into it, the more I thought something stinks about this. I suppose the main thing was that all the smother mothers in Britain had already been exonerated by then, every one of them. And yet it proceeded here. So that's where the question mark on smother mother came from. The next book is a book that proves that sometimes it doesn't matter how many copies you sell or how many people read it, it's who reads it that counts. Now this woman, Emma Cunliffe, was a Melbourne legal student. One thing you know, she cut her teeth on, first before she became as posh as she is now. She cut her teeth on the Lindy Chamberlain case. And out of the Lindy Chamberlain case, she got interested in the Folbigg case, and she did her PhD in it. And she was a law student, so it's irretrievably legal, and it's irretrievably academic. It's very long, it's very thorough, and it's absolutely bloody brilliant. I mean, it's called Murder, Medicine and Motherhood. And this woman has been a stalwart supporter of Kathleen Folbigg ever since. She concluded that Kathleen Folbigg in 2003 had not had a fair trial, that the verdict was unsafe, and they ought to do it again. The medical myth I'm talking about is best expressed by Meadows' law. Sir Roy Meadows was a paediatrician, a bit of a celeb, and he wrote the book, The ABC of Child Abuse. And he's a terribly inventive fellow, and he picked up on an American book, and he came up with this little aphorism called Meadows' Law. 1 sudden infant death is a tragedy. 2 is suspicious. And 3 is murder until proved otherwise. This man testified in the case of Sally Clark, which was probably the most high profile of the smother mother murders. She's killed 2 of her kids. He said that the chances of 2 SIDS deaths in the family were 1 in 73 million. And he got that figure by putting 1 over 8,400 and something, and squaring it, 8,400 and something multiplied by 400 and something, 8,400 comes up at around 73 million. And that went down, the appeal judges, the juries, they all said, And he was a very good performer. He avuncular, didn't seem to like what he was doing, but, pressed on, and one thing and another. All these women who are listed here, well, the first three have been released from jail, and Tripudi Patel, he was in such disgrace by the time her case came to trial that the trial just sort of came to an end and she was acquitted. But the harm had been done. I mean, Sally Clark, when she got out of jail after 3.5 years, hit the bottle, and within 2.5 years of freedom, she died of alcoholic poisoning. And this is Kathleen Folbigg, aged 36, in 2003, facing trial. Before that, there'd been a hearing in Newcastle at the Magistrates Court, a bail hearing, right? And the bail was opposed. Now, one of the things that's not in my book, because I found it out too late, she had a passport which she used as a kid, right? And you can't use a child's passport when you're an adult, obviously. She didn't have a passport. And they said that she was a big flight risk. Well, I just think it's nonsense. I think that they wanted to keep her in jail to get this damned headline in the papers. That's what I believe to be the case. That, and to keep her away from her ex, Craig, in case he changed his testimony. Now, 1 in a trillion is a figure that was used in the same stupid way with 4 kids, you know, the square off, square off, square off, by a woman called Jan Offhoven. She, out of Minnesota, she sees mother is everywhere. She thinks, you know, a very large percentage of Sid's deaths are murders. And the judge didn't allow her 1 in a trillion to be told to the court. So they just used rare. Pigs might fly. Lightning doesn't strike in the same place twice, etc. And it's a very memorable figure. Now, this here's how to get around all the boring legal stuff. Convicted, she actually got 40 years with 30 years non-parole. That was brought back by an appeal here. Who that man is, I don't know. I talked about murder, medicine and motherhood, the book. It was sent to a guy called Professor Stephen Cordner, who used to be the boss of the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, which incidentally is everywhere agreed to be the finest forensic medicine outfit in Australia. I mean, even the people who are rivals aren't arguing about that. He read it, he thought it was pretty good, and he spent months writing the longest pathology report he'd ever written in his life. And one of the things he did, just one thing he did, he got the photomicrographs of the heart muscle of Laura's heart, and he sent it to 10 people, 10 pathologists, and he said, blind test, you know. This belongs to a child who died, you know, such and such an age. Would you say that myocarditis was COD, the cause of death? And 10 of them said yes. One of them said, well, it's very florid. Florid's up one end. Dr. Carla's original one was at light and not very extensive. And this one said it was extensive and fluid, which is the worst category. So he said, Laura died of myocarditis. Now, if Laura died of myocarditis, you're down to 3 murders. So she murdered 3 of them, but Laura was different. It's too much to ask, you know. I mean, see, it's a lot burger. She killed all 4, or she didn't kill any. I mean, you'd have to be perverse to try and argue otherwise. And, you know, the evidence didn't bear it up. He also said that SIDS was perfectly good reason, you know, perfectly good verdict for the other children, and epilepsy killed Patrick. So he wrote this report. This report became a battering ram to attack the New South Wales citadel of obstinacy. Forgive me, my friend. The citadel of obstinacy that the appeal courts, the judicial system there is, and they finally, under great pressure, opened up an inquiry and got Justice Blanche to head it in the year 1919 under this particular man here, who was the Attorney General, Chief Law Officer of the state, Mark Speaker, who was given to delay, but not as much as his predecessor. She was dreadful. Anyway, they met, they discussed it, and Blanche said, I'm even more convinced of her guilt. Those diaries, so we'll just press on and indeed go back a bit. Oh, sorry. These are the diaries. I mean, all I'm going to say about the diaries is, compared with the gene evidence, they're lightweight. Not one admission there. She didn't say, I killed anybody. She, in 40 to 50,000 words, this book is 70. They picked out 29 diary entries, put a line under, the detectives did and the prosecutors did and everybody did, one thing or another, put a line under it and said, haha, this is tantamount to a confession. And, you'd have to read some of these things, but what it was a mother with impossibly high standards of motherhood. She didn't seem to realise that it's the hardest job in the world and that everyone's a failure. It's just, how good you do and she was really a good mother. Everyone agrees about that. Even her ex-husband said that she was a good mother. Right? But she had guilt about these children dying. Well, guilt in a courtroom means you did it. And guilt is an emotion. Sometimes it's irrational as anything. You just feel vaguely guilty. So I won't be spending much time on the diaries because they're police contempt in my opinion. The question asked at the Blanche inquiry was, one of the questions was, since 2003, has there been any, advances in genetics? Wow! 2003 was the same year that the human genome was finally cracked. After billions of dollars, hundreds of labs, thousands of scientists worked on it, they finally had the human genome cracked in 2003. Since then, genetics has gone through the most unbelievable growth. The number of genetics labs in genomics labs, and put the two together, I can't even tell you what the difference is, to tell the truth. But the point was, those labs have tripled. I think I had it in the book, and and if I'd been more up to date, I think I could have said quadrupled. It's a very explosive area, all of it, not medicine, science, research, So there was they said this, all the geneticists got together. They were divided into two teams: the Sydney team, who all worked for the Department of Health, New South Wales, and the Canberra team, who all worked for the John Kerr Medical Research Centre, Centre for Personalised Immunity, Australian National University. They're all Canberra. So they had the Canberra team and the Sydney team. Pretty reasonable thing. What they do is they do whole genomic sequencing. If they could get the samples and put them through the labs, the bioinformatics flow, a whole lot of little A's and C's and G's and so on, masses of boring detail, comes out on the bioinformatics, and then it's searched against known things, propensities for cardiac, propensities for epilepsy, and so on and so forth. And they had a few things to check, the two teams. So that's what they were going to do. I'll come back to the cardiac testing in a moment. Now, in this thing, girls are round, boys are square. If you're not in it, and Craig would not give us DNA, he refused to give us DNA. We're talking about a swollen mouth with a toothpick and a bit of cotton wool. But they've got mums, buccal swab, like this, and they got from here. This is a scientific miracle. For some reason, I would have thought that Laura here, right, would have had the best, you know, because of the suspicion surrounding her death. I'd have thought that they'd have lots of samples of her tissue. Well, when you're born, heel gets pricked. It goes onto a Guthrie cart, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that was the only thing they had. Well, at first, they did actually find some more stuff, but you know, it had been at ambient temperature as a file, you know, with a bundle of string around it in a folder and thrown into a, you know, like a library, you know, catalogue, like that sort of shelving, and it was degraded and they couldn't use it. So for her, they did WES, which, sorry about that, okay, that's WES, guaranteed. It's whole exome sequencing. That means they only sequence those genes that are known to produce proteins. And it was a technical feat beyond measure, it really was. But they got it and all the information was good. Right. Professor Carola Vanuswa and a visiting fellow from Macedonia, North Macedonia, Tador Arsov, you know, unfortunate name and quarter even here, but still, they went to her place to, you know, got to the breakfast bar and started going through it, and they had one of those rare things, you know, eureka moment. They both said, CARM2! And CARM2 is one of 3 genes. CARM1, CARM2 and CARM3. They all produce a substance, a protein called collodion. Commodulin, sorry, my apologies. And as far as they were concerned, they had it. Tador had gone to Silverwater Jail, where Kathy was, and although they got no help from Craig and all this, she was able to remember a whole lot of things, and she had friends who remembered other things. I mean, she's got a network of friends, and they worked out that there's Kathleen and Craig, and there's the kids who have died, and, you know, the whole history's there. And what else did they do? One of the things, when they discovered that the commodulin, which we'll come to in a moment, is basically responsible for the regular rhythm of the heart. Your heart, regular rhythm depends on the. This millivolts by milliseconds is actually quite old. It's 1880s technology, but it's got much swisher now and much more precise. And that's a normal QT interval. Now, I'm just checking my notes here, if you forgive me. Q is low ventricular polarity, like the electrical charge is low, right? The heart relaxes, blood, if there's any about, there usually is, floods in sort of semi-passively, and it goes through this upsurge and downsurge and gets, and that's T, which is repolarization, which starts the cycle over again. Now, if this takes 300, 480 milliseconds, that's a normal heartbeat. If it's got longer than 480, it's long TQ interval syndrome. And syndrome, again, means we don't know. There's a lot of causes. It's not. It's a condition, but it could have a lot of causes. Okay. A fight developed between the Sydney team and the Canberra team, right? There's quite a few things here. But there's no doubt in my mind that the Canberra team worked harder, okay? Like, they went to Silverwater and did it. Now, right from the start, the Canberra team and the Sydney team disagreed about using the American College of Genetics and Genomics data, right? This is a 5-category thing, from benign, which means we know it won't hurt you, to likely benign, we don't think it'll hurt you, VUS, variant of unknown significance, which is most of them, like far and away most of them that have been studied, and then there's likely pathological. Likely pathological says there's a 90% chance that this is disease causing. And then there's pathological. There's a 99% chance that this is disease causing. Canberra thought these guidelines, which are, you know, about recommending surgery or heavy course of drugs or clinical measures, were a bit pointless when you're only trying to establish reasonable doubt on dead people who can't be hurt by it. And we, you know, be sensible. They fought over this all the time, and they fought also. Oh, here's my collodion. This calmodulin, like I said, it's on 3 different genes, CAM1, CAM2 and CAM3. These ones here were the 5 that had been discovered before this case, before this came up, CAM3. This is the one they discovered in Kathy and her 2 daughters. This graphical thing is a bit of nonsense to show you where the amino acids are. It has some meaning for geneticists, but I've forgotten what it is, and that's the new one. So that's the one that goes up, goes to your heart, releases little calcium ions, and does all this polarisation and repolarisation. Carola Vanessa felt she was getting nowhere in the inquiry, and she was getting angrier and angrier about the Sydney team and their absolute refusal to rule this CAM2 G114W as a, or R as happened, as a this new to science. No one ever described this before. And their reluctance to call it pathogenic or likely pathogenic, but call it a variant of unknown significance, was starting to give her irrits. And she wrote to a marvellous fellow called Peter Schwartz, who's in Milan. He's a cardiologist. He was the one that started up the calmodulin register. And I think I said in the book, if he coughs, the Journal of New England Medicine and Lancet would have a fight to try and publish it. And he's very, very, one of the top experts. So the Sydney team kept saying, oh, during sleep it's unusual. You know, if you're going to have a heart attack, cardiac arrest because of a CAM gene, you should be doing exertion, or you've had a heavy emotional shock. We now know that ringing bells, certain smells, and infections, and pseudoephedrine, which incidentally Laura was taking for her sniffle, which she was just getting over a sniffle, and like most of those sniffle drugs, it was with pseudoephedrine, which is one of the known things that can trigger cardiac arrest. I don't know what's happened to the Europost paper, it doesn't matter. Schwartz went into bat for Kathleen Folbigg and said, look, you know, this is what killed the girls. Don't kid yourself, right? And he wrote one thing, and she sent a draft of this paper, finally published in November 2019, and she tried to get Blanche at the last minute to reopen the inquiry to consider the new evidence from Schwartz, the cardiologist, and a guy called Overgaard Toft from Norway, one of the world's top protein chemists. And that's the conclusion. A novel functional commodulin variant, that R should be there, should be another G. That's all that changed. One amino acid. Predicted to cause idiopathic ventricular fibrillation. IVF. Idiopathic means unknown. We don't know what causes it, right? This long-winded thing here. Ventricular tachycardia, that's a ventricle, and it's irregular heart rhythms, any irregular heart rhythms, or mild long QT syndrome is present in 2 children. A fatal arrhythmic event may have been triggered by their intercurrent infections. Thus, the disease causing in the protein emerges as a reasonable explanation for a natural cause of their death. Right? Since that paper's been published, a thing called ClinVar, which is where you go, it's a data bank where you go to figure out what genes are up, what genes are being mentioned, has put it down, and it's pathogenic because of the deaths of Laura and Sarah being the reasons why. They're at odds with the law. Some of these people are inherently interesting. There's Dor Asov from North Macedonia. This guy with tiger education. He's not only got a PhD in genetics, he's also got a PhD in law. And he was the one that put Carola Venusa together with the people who were trying to help Kathleen Folbigg. Is there anybody else here? This woman's from Melbourne, I think. She's got a bioinformatics lab. It's either her or her, and I can't figure out which. This is Michael Toft-Overgaard, and that's Peter J. Schwartz. Matthew Cook was at the AAU. He was part of the Sydney team. 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. And they published this. And now it's the back door. Don't even think about, if you join the police and you're ambitious, don't think about getting a smother mother charge up, because no one wants it. Now, I won't dwell long on this, but in the male children, and this is still under investigation, the Carola found out that they too have a crooked gene, the bassoon gene, BSN, here, bassoon. The bassoon gene and the piccolo gene, PCLO, between them mediate the release of chemicals, basically, that opens up the synapses of the nerve cells and is responsible again for polarization, for making the signals move. Anyway, in mice, quite a few experiments have been done. The mice are knockout mice. Their breeding is so well known, they're like racehorses. You get them. You muck around with their bassoon gene, right? And you have a control group where you don't muck around with them at all, and they don't look any different for a bit. But as they get on a bit, the ones that have seem to get less excitable, don't move around so much, they seem to have vision problems, and they die sort of curled up in a pose that would suggest they've died of epilepsy, an epileptic fit. And, well, Patrick had epilepsy. So it's kind of intriguing, but, science isn't in. One of the things that really inspired me was that, scientists not for silence, I saw on a climate change debate today, big banner, with a whole lot of people superglued themselves to a window. They're all scientists in lab coats. And it's a long time since I've seen that. I think that in Australia here we've witnessed one of the very few rebellions of scientists over Kathleen Folbigg. The petition was a remarkable petition. Peter Schwartz, Peter Doherty down here, Elizabeth Blackburn, Nobel Prize winners both, and for that matter, even what's his name over in Western Australia, the bloke who said the universe is actually speeding up, not slowing down. Another Nobel Prize winner. He signed late. I mean, really quite remarkable. Right, the bit I think that set them off, I don't have this from anybody. This is the appeal court. They went to the appeal and said, look, Blanche wouldn't engage with the science, right? Well, he said that she remained guilty and upheld the verdict. And the appeal court, plotting old appeal courts, this is about the third one she's been to. The girl's deaths with us outliers when compared with those reported in the literature. That word there, outliers, I looked it up in the dictionary just to make sure I knew what I was talking about. But I think that's the one that really angered the scientists, that they weren't central. You know, there were some trivial details. I mean, they thought it was the core, and that's when the scientific rebellion started. At the present inquiry, which is going to go on in 14th of November, the Academy of Science are going to have their lawyers there. Nothing's going to get past. I mean, this is unbelievable activism among scientists. Well, so Kathy, in 2019, well, our hopes were dashed by Blanche's decisions. Now, I'm going to give her the last word. She wrote to Mark Speakman, the Attorney General I talked about before, the Chief Law Officer in New South Wales. And this is how it ends up. For over 30 years I've grieved for the loss of my children. Cedric said to you, read yourself. Please soften your heart. He doesn't need to soften his heart, he's got to unfreeze his brain, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll see what happens on the 14th of November when the cardiac and genetic part takes place. And they're going to have another look at the diaries. Why, I don't know, but they are. It's going to be in February next year. Please notice that the punishment that the law metes out from the bench is taking time off you, or spoiling your time, making your time miserable because you've got no freedom. Yet they cannot be hurried themselves. They're slower than a wet week. And the worst of them are Attorney Generals at the top. I mean, it's shocking. Kathleen Folbigg has spent most of her time waiting. It's sort of like, it's like doing 18 years in a queue. So that brings me to the end. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to hear them.
When was the husband?